Her phone vibrated 3 times before I realized it. It was sitting on top of the dresser, forgotten, as if it had been left there on purpose. The screen flashed a name I'd never seen before, accompanied by a heart. It was at that moment that something inside me broke silently. The house seemed the same as every morning. The smell of coffee, the distant sound of the news, the light filtering through the curtains. But there was something different in the air. As if time had stopped to tell me that nothing would ever be the same again. It was an ordinary Monday, and I felt light, even proud of us both. We had celebrated 30 years of marriage, and I believed that, despite the flaws and routine, there was still love. I believed that the trust, built between raised children, paid bills, and shared dreams, was too solid to break. But the truth is, betrayal doesn't begin with a kiss, nor with a confession. It begins with silence, with the subtle feeling that something has changed, and the courage to refuse to see it. I watched him rush off, late for work, and heard him say, "I love you," without even looking me in the eye. Automatic, empty words, repeated so many times they'd lost their weight. And yet they felt strange that morning. Maybe because, without knowing it, he was saying goodbye to a version of me that would never return. For a few seconds I stood in front of my phone, watching the screen light flicker on and off. Like a lighthouse in a sea I no longer recognized. Could ignore it, pretend I didn't see it, pretend I trusted it, pretend I still believed. But there's a moment, small and irreversible, when the truth chooses us. And once it chooses, there's no turning back. Picked up the device. My hands were shaking, but my face was serene. The password was the same as always. Our wedding date. A cruel irony. The touch of the screen under my fingers felt cold, distant, as if this harmless object had the power to change my entire life. And I knew it did. As I unlocked it, the sound of the clock on the wall became unbearable. Each tick was a blow, each second a memory. The day we met, our first apartment, the birth of our son, the laughter on road trips, the slow Sundays, the promises that seemed eternal. It was all there, squeezed between the past I remembered and the present I was about to discover. Why do people lie to the people who believed in them the most? Why is it so easy to destroy what took a lifetime to build? The phone blinked again, as if mocking my hesitation, and in that instant I realized that love has a scent. Mine at that moment smelled of iron and cold coffee, a mixture of anger and lucidity, the harbinger of a turning point I didn't yet understand. The message was there on the screen, beckoning me to cross the line between naivete and the abyss. It wasn't just a text, it was proof, confession, mirror. Because sometimes what hurts the most isn't discovering we've been betrayed. It's realizing that, for so long, we helped keep the lie alive. The sound of the wind blowing through the window brought me back to reality. I could still leave my phone there, pretend nothing had happened. But something inside me had already awakened. An ancient instinct, silenced by years of patience and understanding. It was the same instinct that makes a woman recognize danger before she sees it. And then, my heart beating slowly, I took a deep breath and touched the screen. What I found next still haunts me, because certain truths don't just hurt, they transform us. And it was in that exact moment that I began to understand that love, when it ceases to be a home, becomes a prison. I hadn't expected to find anything other than small distractions, work messages, mundane notifications, unimportant memories. But what I saw took my breath away. They were old conversations, carefully stored, full of short sentences, charged with an intimacy I no longer recognized. Simple words, but with a tone that only those in love understand. And it wasn't me he was responding to with that brilliance. I read each line and felt as if the ground were giving way beneath my feet, as if the air around me had become too dense to breathe. The photos came later, subtle, banal to the unwary eye. A coffee, a parked car, a pair of clasped hands. But I knew that watch, that coat, that smirk. I knew it all because I'd experienced it before, when it was with me. And that was the cruelest part. Realizing he hadn't created anything new, just repeated the same script, changing the protagonist of the story. I felt a mixture of anger and calm. A calm so profound it was frightening. It wasn't the kind of fury that explodes. It was the silence before the storm. The kind of silence that arises when pain surpasses the threshold of tears and transforms into lucidity. I walked to the window, observed the day outside, and noticed how the world went on as normal, indifferent to my collapse. People passed by on the street, birds sang, the sun beat down on the leaves with the same sweetness as always. And there I was, standing, with my entire life crumbling inside a room too bright for so much emptiness. It's curious how betrayal has a smell, a texture, a sound. The smell was that of the cheap perfume I'd already smelled on his shirts. The texture was cold, metallic, like the body of a cell phone in my hands. The sound was my own breath trying to stay steady as I read each word. Because betrayal doesn't just happen externally. It settles within us, in the space between who we believed we were and who we discover we are. There was something symbolic in forgetting my cell phone. As if fate had left a door open, inviting me to cross. But crossing comes at a price. On one side, comfortable ignorance. On the other, the truth that never allows for return. And I knew deep down that my crossing had just begun. My hands were still shaking as I put the device back in its place. As if nothing had happened. The house was silent, but I heard everything. The creaking of the floor, the ticking of the clock, the hum of the refrigerator. Ordinary sounds that, in that moment, seemed like screams. Each noise reminded me that I was still there, alive, conscious, dealing with something that could destroy anyone else. But not me. As he went about his day, unaware that his secret had been discovered, something inside me reconfigured. It wasn't just pain, it was clarity. I remembered all the times I'd downplayed his absences, made excuses for his mood swings, believed love justified everything. And perhaps that was the most painful part. Realizing how much I myself had contributed to the farce, believing that keeping the peace was the same as preserving love. A peace that, now, I saw never really existed. It was just the disguise of those who don't want to face the truth. I sat on the couch, my head still spinning, and a question formed in my mind. How many women have experienced this same moment? The exact second when love turns to distrust, when the once warming gaze turns to ice. Perhaps that's why so many people choose to stay here, following each revelation, because they recognize themselves in that fine line between love and loss, between surrender and awakening. The clock continued to tick away as if mocking me, reminding me that time doesn't stop for those betrayed. And I knew that when he returned, everything would seem the same. The same hug, the same practiced smile, the same routine. But I would no longer be the same woman who waited for him. I left my phone on the table and walked to the mirror. The reflection stared back at me with different eyes. It wasn't just pain I saw there. It was the seed of something new, still silent, still small, but growing. The certainty that what was to come would be greater than the blow I'd just received. The house seemed to breathe with me. And, for the first time in a long time, I felt that the silence, the very one that had previously suffocated me, would now be my weapon. I didn't yet know how or when, but I knew that this story, my story, was far from over. That afternoon, when he returned from work, the sound of the key turning in the lock seemed louder than ever. My heart raced, not out of love, but out of a mixture of anticipation and revulsion. I saw him enter, smiling, saying the same words as always, the same tone of someone who believes he has everything under control. He had no idea that every gesture, every breath he took in front of me, was now observed by an all-seeing gaze. For the first time I saw without illusions. The afternoon light streamed in through the window, casting long shadows on the ground. The contrast between light and shadow seemed to convey exactly what I was feeling. He talked about traffic, work, anything, and I just listened in silence. Inside, it was like being caught between two worlds. That of the woman still feigning normalcy, and that of the woman already planning her next move. At the table, the clatter of cutlery became deafening. His every movement was studied, every glance avoided, every smile that tried to disguise the distance. I noticed details that had previously escaped me. The way he averted his eyes when I stared at him for more than 3 seconds, the mechanical way he asked about my day. Tiny cracks in a wall that seemed solid. The food, once full of flavor, now seemed gray. Chewing was an automatic gesture, as if my body refused to participate in a scene my heart had already abandoned. The silence between us was so thick that I could hear the ticking of the clock mingling with the sound of my breathing. He, distracted, looked at his cell phone, unaware that that same object, forgotten in the morning, was now a sleeping bomb between us. For a moment, I wondered what would happen if I said it all right then and there. If I showed him the messages, the photos, the secrets he thought he'd kept so carefully. But I realized it wasn't time yet. Revenge, when born of impulse, is just another wound. When born of silence, it's transformation. After dinner, he got up and said he needed to rest. I stood there, watching his back disappear down the hallway. That image stuck with me like a repeated scene from a movie I no longer want to watch. The lights in the house seemed colder, and the loneliness thicker. I walked to the bedroom, touched the pillow he was using, and caught a strange scent, familiar and yet alien. A sweet, invasive scent that reminded me of the messages. It all made too much sense to be coincidence. I lay in bed, but sleep wouldn't come. I stared at the ceiling, watching the moonlight shine through the gaps in the curtains. The entire room felt like a stage, and I was the main character in a play whose plot no one else knew. The irony was that, even without saying a word, I already held the power in my hands. He just didn't know it yet. For hours, I thought about everything we'd built, or that I believed we'd built. I thought about every effort, every sacrifice, every time I defended his name when people suggested he didn't deserve me. And I realized something painful. Maybe they'd always been right. This realization didn't break me. On the contrary, it strengthened me. It was as if the pain burned away the last illusions and revealed a new, resilient layer, made of everything left after love. The woman I saw in the mirror was now different, stronger, more lucid. Beside him, sleep seemed too light. How could someone sleep so peacefully on a bed of lies? His rhythmic breathing was almost a provocation. Each sigh was a reminder of how much he underestimated what lay within me. I knew he saw me as predictable, patient, docile. Little did I know that the silence surrounding him was actually the sound of the rope tightening around his own disguise. Dawn crept slowly on, and the moon glided across the sky like a silent clock. With each passing minute, I felt more awake, more aware. It was a paradoxical sensation, a profound weariness mixed with a growing energy that called for movement. Not destruction, but truth. When the clock struck 3 in the morning, I got up. I walked around the house in silence, observing everything with the eyes of someone saying goodbye. Every detail seemed to carry a memory. The photo frame in the hallway, the rug in the living room, the lamp on the table. Everything bore witness to a story about to change direction. And yet, what I felt wasn't fear. It was a dangerous serenity, the kind of calm that precedes a revolution. Because I knew that, from that moment on, my every gesture would cease to be a reaction and become a choice. And the choices of a betrayed woman, when made in silence, are the most unpredictable. The next morning dawned with a silence that seemed to have a voice. The sun streamed through the window, but the light, instead of warming, seemed to reveal everything that was out of place. He was still asleep, lying beside me, oblivious to the turmoil within me. I watched him for a few minutes. His calm face, his light breathing, the same man I'd sworn to love for so many years. And for the first time, I realized that that face stirred nothing in me. Not anger, not love, not pity, only distance. I got up slowly, the floor cold beneath my feet, and went to the kitchen. I made coffee, the same as every day, with the same care. The sound of the filter, the aroma filling the air. Everything followed the usual ritual. But there was something different about me. I was no longer the woman who poured coffee out of habit, but one who now chose each gesture with purpose. As the dark liquid filled the pot, I felt it was like looking at life itself. Hot, intense, but if left on the stove, it overflows and burns. He appeared shortly after, his hair still messy, asking why I was up so early. Smiled. The same smile I had every day, the one he'd learned to interpret as tranquility. I responded naturally, disguising the look that already saw beyond the surface. He sat down, drank coffee, and talked about work, appointments, plans. I just listened, recording every word like someone studying the enemy before battle. Inside, I relived every detail of the previous night. The messages, the images, the scent, the certainty. Everything was there, present, pulsing beneath my skin. And yet I remained calm, because there is a kind of strength that only arises when pain matures. And perhaps that's why those who experience it are never the same again. As he left, I realized that love has a specific sound when it breaks. It's not a bang, it's a quiet, almost imperceptible crack that only those who carry it within their hearts can hear. And I heard it. In that moment, I knew there was no going back. The bond that had united us was now just appearance. The rest of the day passed in slow motion. Every single thing I did, tidying the house, hanging clothes, tending the plants, seemed to take on new meaning. Simple tasks became a refuge, almost a silent ritual of resistance. It's curious how everyday life can be both a shelter and a prison at the same time. While my hands were busy, my mind was building pathways. I didn't yet know what to do, but I knew I had to act. And acting required calm, not impulse. That afternoon, I sat by the window and watched the street. People walked hurriedly, carrying their own truths, their own secrets. I wondered how many of them lived stories like mine, disguised in smiles, sustained by silence. It's at this point that many feel the urge to support this journey, leaving a silent sign that the message has touched them. Because, deep down, everyone has felt the bitter taste of trusting someone who didn't deserve it. Later, as the sun sank behind the rooftops, I felt something curious. It wasn't sadness that overcame me, but a kind of steady serenity, as if I'd weathered a storm and was now in the eye of it. There was calm, but also a warning. The time for passive suffering was over. I opened the closet and began rummaging through some old boxes. Photographs, tickets, travel mementos, gifts from dates that seemed important. I touched each one as if saying goodbye. There was no longer any pain there, only recognition. It was as if I finally saw the whole picture. The woman who believed and the man who took advantage of that faith. At the end of the day, the mirror returned an image I barely recognized. There was a firmness in her gaze, something that had previously been dormant. And it was then that I understood. When a woman awakens to the truth, nothing can erase it. Not fear, not time, not lost love. That night, when he returned and hugged me with the same automatic gesture, I remained motionless. Inside, my mind was miles away, already plotting the next move. The game had begun, and he hadn't even imagined it yet. What would come next, I still didn't know. But something inside me told me it would be big. Much bigger than he could bear. That night, the silence in the house had a different weight. It wasn't just the absence of sound, it was a presence. A dense silence, full of meaning, as if every wall knew what was about to happen. I moved slowly, observing everything. The curtains swaying slightly, the cold glow of the light on the furniture, the distant echo of the clock in the living room. It was strange how everything remained the same, while inside me, everything had already changed. He slept. I could hear his steady breathing. His body surrendered to the trust of someone who believed he was safe. The image of him lying there filled me with a mixture of calm and unease. I knew that this man, resting peacefully, was the same man who, just hours earlier, had exchanged messages that destroyed years of complicity. And yet, there was no hatred within me. There was something stronger, more serene, a lucidity born of pain, allowing me to see every detail with frightening clarity. I walked to the window and looked out. The street was empty, lit only by an old street lamp. The wind blew gently, bringing the distant sound of a dog barking. Everything seemed suspended, as if time had stopped to observe me. And it was in that moment that I realized the contrast that dominated my life. Outside, the world was peaceful. Inside, a gale was gathering. I remembered the early years of our marriage. The days when the simple touch of a hand was enough to make me feel safe. The time when I believed love was enough to keep two people together. How much naivete can fit within the blind faith of a woman in love? I had built a home on promises that now proved hollow, fragile as glass about to shatter. The fear of losing what was left of my story briefly visited me. And with it came a question that kept recurring within me. What is truly lost when the truth comes out? Is it the other person who leaves? Or are we who finally depart back to ourselves? As I thought, I heard the creak of the wood in the house's structure, as if it were breathing itself. There was something symbolic in that sound, as if the universe were confirming that everything hidden must one day move. Nothing remains hidden forever. And perhaps that was my role now, to let the truth make its way, even if it meant the end of everything I had known until then. Dawn arrived before I'd slept a wink. The sun streamed through the crack in the curtain and traced a golden streak across the sheet. The light, so beautiful, seemed cruel, because it revealed everything: the traces of exhaustion, the marks of disappointment, his still sleeping face serene, oblivious to the weight of his own lie. I stared at him for long seconds, and the silent question returned. Who would he be when he knew I already knew? The answer didn't matter. What mattered was what I would be. I stood up and looked at myself in the mirror. There was something new in my gaze, a firm, different glow. The woman reflected there no longer saw herself as a victim. She was someone in the process of being built, aware of her own power, even if she didn't yet know how to use it. The wrinkles that had once bothered me now felt like lines of force, scars of survival. I wasn't just the betrayed wife. I was the silent witness to a transformation he would never understand. Throughout the day, I watched him from afar, studying every movement, every word. And I realized how guilt has a body of its own. It weighs on the shoulders, changes the rhythm of speech, makes the gaze restless. He seemed to sense something had changed, but he couldn't quite put his finger on it. Maybe it was my silence, now denser, sharper. Or maybe it was just the reflection of his own conscience trying to escape. The contrast between us grew with each passing hour. He feigned normalcy, and I pretended to believe him. Two actors playing different roles on the same stage. But unlike him, I already knew the play's ending. That night, I sat alone in the living room. The house was plunged into darkness. The shadows cast by the lamps created patterns on the walls, and I saw in them fragments of what remained of our history. It was like looking into a cracked mirror. The images were still there, but none of them were whole. In that moment, I understood something profound. It's not the betrayal itself that destroys, but the silence that follows. The absence of truth is what rots what could still be saved. And I wouldn't be a part of that. But before any revelation, before the inevitable confrontation, there was something I needed to do. Something that only time and silence could teach me to execute perfectly. The game was set, but the pieces didn't yet know their place. And as the clock ticked away, I felt something invisible growing inside me, a patient force ready to burst forth. Something told me the right moment was approaching, and when it arrived, there would be no turning back. The next afternoon, the world seemed to have a harsh shine, as if the light hit my skin but didn't penetrate. I went out to buy bread, and every face on the street seemed to carry an invisible question. The cashier smiled politely, but her gaze slid over my gray hair, over my skin, as if searching for an explanation for the silence that enveloped me. "Are you okay, ma'am?" she asked in a sweet tone that didn't hide her curiosity. I nodded and slowly handed back the change, feeling the weight of that word, ma'am, like a reminder that life has seen me stand up many times after greater falls. Outside, the smell of warm bread mingled hope and guilt, as if I could breathe a future I hadn't yet dared to ask for. At home, the hallway seemed longer. I touched the walls as if confirming my own existence. The living room, so much my own, was suddenly neutral territory. In one corner, the family photos. Meticulously aligned smiles, ironed clothes, set table, the portrait of the exemplary marriage. And behind it all, an empty space that I could now see. It wasn't just about him. It was about everything I had to swallow to fit into this photo. My sister-in-law's sly comment about my strong manner, my son-in-law's joke about my genius, the neighbor who mistook me for the cleaning lady and asked for a little cloth in the hallway. Little stones in my shoe that, year after year, hardened my dignity. Called it peace. They called it normalcy. I opened the window. The curtain inflated like a lung. Outside, a child chased a ball, and her laughter pierced my chest. Life goes on, I thought, but not the same way for everyone. I remembered the first time I walked into the bank holding hands with him. 2 smiles for the doctor. A formal good morning for me. The clerk barely raised his head when he attended to me alone. Weeks later, as if I were a shadow. The shadow that cooks, that organizes, that sustains. The shadow that now carries fire. In the bedroom, the closet exuded a perfume that wasn't mine. I felt my throat tighten. My body remembers, even when my mind wants to deny it. I opened an old box and found letters of mine from another time. Sweet, long, full of a hope that today would seem almost childish. I touched the paper and realized how love has a texture. Mine was porous, alive, ready to absorb. It learned this, and fed. Night fell with indecent swiftness. The lit lamp drew islands of light on the floor, and the shadow of my body split on the corners of the dresser. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just breathed. It's curious how, when pain ripens, it silences without disappearing. It stays there like dark water, waiting for us to decide what to do with it. I could confront him at that moment, but I realized it would just be a release. I wanted construction. I wanted the truth to have structure and an audience. I wanted the mask to fall, not just between 4 walls. I grabbed my phone and, without rushing, organized what I needed. Nothing loud, nothing heroic, just the order of the facts. Screenshots saved in a folder with a random name, like someone storing seeds on dry land. I knew as I did that this wasn't just about proving something to him. It was about proving to myself that I hadn't imagined it, that I hadn't exaggerated, that I hadn't gone crazy. The lit gas wasn't my distraction, it was a flame. The living room clock ticked away. He called, said he'd be home later, and laughed with practiced ease. I had a snack with the guys, he explained, and I could almost hear the napkin crinkle on the other end. Okay, I replied. My voice came out clear, without a tremor. Inside, I felt that old duality settle in. Hope and fear, gain and loss, light and shadow. Hope of leaving in one piece. Fear that, when the theater was dismantled, there would be no stage left. Gain of myself. Loss of what was never mine. I sat on the living room floor, my back against the sofa, and closed my eyes. I remembered my mother teaching me to breathe through pain, like calling life back in. I obeyed. The air entered my lungs slowly and left like a decision. I wasn't going to beg for an explanation. I wasn't going to tug at his pants for scraps. I was going to raise my head before all the places where they wanted me to remain silent. Family, neighbors, colleagues, and say, I saw. And seeing changes everything. When he came in later, the hallway reeked of the sweet scent of someone else's perfume mixed with our soap. A vulgar chemistry. He kissed my cheek lightly and looked away. He spoke of his tiredness, took off his shoes, and walked to the bathroom with the body of someone crossing a minefield, unsure of where they were stepping. I followed him with my eyes, unhurried. The whole house seemed to hear the sound of his footsteps. The cold tile returned a brief echo, and I knew. I had reached the point where silence is not omission. It is strategy. I lay in bed, my body awake. The moon cut the room into 2 bands, light and dark. In one, the photograph of our first summer together. In the other, the projection of my hand holding the cell phone. The image said more than any sentence. On one side, the promise. On the other, the proof. Between the two, me, the woman who learned to balance on the edge of her own voice. Sleep, when it came, was shallow, almost awake. I dreamed of a room full of people, familiar faces, suppressed laughter, glasses in hand. I was in the center, standing, with the same calm that now lulled me. There was no shouting. There was light. A light that fell on me like recognition, and on him like revelation. I woke with the feeling of having crossed a bridge I haven't yet seen, but already know how to walk. The next day found me ready and at the same time poised, like someone who carries a full glass to the edge of the table without spilling. It's not time yet, I repeated to myself, feeling my chest open like a window. Almost. The exact moment is missing. the one of greatest silence, the one of greatest publicity, the one of greatest truth. And when it arrives, I'll know. Because before the sound of falling, there's always a breath that stops in the air. And I can already hear my own. The next morning began with a calm only known to those on the verge of action. The coffee cooled on the table as I watched the vapor dissipate, slowly and silently, like the illusions I'd been nurturing for years. He'd left in a hurry with the same old speech. Meetings, appointments, phone calls, and the same look of someone who believes they still dominate the board. I, on the other hand, had ceased to be a piece. Now I was the one moving the game. I started the day with calculated gestures. Every word spoken, every silence maintained. His phone was resting on the sideboard when I noticed the face lock wasn't activated. The touch of the screen triggered a succession of messages, like a stream of confessions disguised as banalities. Photos, inside jokes, hearts. A complete theater of a parallel life. My hands trembled for a second, not with anger but with precision. I saved everything. I organized. And, for the first time, I realized that true power is born the moment you stop seeking justice and start building consequences. I spent the rest of the day at work, amid spreadsheets and formal smiles. No one imagined that behind my calm, a strategy was unfolding. Every glance that met mine reflected an ordinary woman. No one saw the volcano contained behind my neutral expression. The sound of the keyboard, the smell of coffee in the break room, the office buzz. Everything served as a soundtrack to the silent plan growing within me. And, between reports, I wondered what so many other women would do in my place. Perhaps that's why so many choose to stay, even when wounded. Because it's easier to endure the familiar than to face the abyss of change. How many have felt this impasse? How many take a deep breath like me before deciding the next step? In the afternoon, the sun streamed through the blinds, streaking the floor with golden shadow-slashed streaks. That image remained etched in my mind. It was as if the light itself taught me about contrast. To see the true brilliance of things, one must embrace the darkness around them. And that was how I began to understand that my pain was, in fact, a tool. That suffering didn't have to reduce me, it could reveal me. When I got home, he was already there. In a suit, heavy perfume. The same rehearsed smile of someone who believes charm erases traces. He talked about his day, about colleagues, about a meeting that went on too long. And as he spoke, I studied him. The quick gestures, the voice that rose a half tone when lying, the subtle averted glance. It was almost theatrical. But I'd also learned to act. I responded with calculated tenderness, like someone who still believes, and let him sink into his own performance. He didn't realize it, but every word he spoke was another line in the script of his own downfall. Later, while he slept, I sat at the foot of his bed and watched the dimly lit room. The sound of the fan mixed with his breathing created a strange, almost hypnotic melody. There, in that interlude between action and waiting, I realized that true revenge isn't screaming. It's process. It's patience. It's the look of someone who already knows the ending but pretends to still be in the middle of it. I breathed slowly, mentally replaying the plan that already had form, time, and place. And the more the silence grew, the more palpable the tension became. Like the moment before thunder, when the air seems suspended and the world holds its breath. Over the next few days, small changes began to occur. He treated me more carefully, perhaps out of guilt, perhaps out of fear. His gaze searched mine, trying to decipher if I knew. And I left him in the dark, the most uncomfortable place for someone who thrives on manipulation. Meanwhile, I continued smoothing over the rough edges, setting the perfect stage. The irony was that the more he tried to maintain appearances, the more he contributed to the spectacle that was about to begin. People around me, friends, family, colleagues, noticed something different. "You seem calmer," they said. I smiled, knowing that calm is just another way of saying, ready. And inside, something solidified. The initial pain had transformed into an almost serene strength, built with purpose and precision. One night, standing in front of the mirror, I saw the reflection of the woman he thought he knew and the woman who, silently, was being reborn. They were two distinct figures occupying the same space, but only one of them truly breathed. The other was merely the reflection of a time gone by. That version of me, the one that waited, the one that trusted, the one that justified, was slowly dying, and I let it go with gratitude. Because freedom doesn't come when someone else frees us, but when we stop asking for permission to exist. Deep down, I knew the moment of reckoning was near. There would be no shouting, no scene, no gratuitous spectacle. Just a perfect sequence of truths exposed, each in its own time, before the right people. And perhaps before himself, at the precise moment when his pride was most fragile. But the curious thing is that, even with all the planning, there was an unexpected feeling growing alongside it. A cold, almost scientific compassion, which made me see how much his downfall would actually be a natural consequence. Justice, sometimes, is just the truth returning to its place of origin. And as I watched the clock ticking away, I realized that life is also a stage that demands rehearsal. Some roles we must play until the very end. Others, like the role of dignity, are born of improvisation. And at this point, perhaps those reading this will understand what I mean. There's something deeply human in watching someone's mask fall, not out of revenge, but out of deservedness. Because deep down, everyone knows when the show of deception is about to end. In the days that followed, something changed, invisibly but profoundly. The routine remained, the words exchanged were the same, the smell of morning coffee still filled the house. And yet, the air had a different weight, a different rhythm. He walked as if trying not to awaken a secret. I watched him with the same care as someone reading a familiar book, but now searching for the subtext, what lurks between the lines. Everything about him seemed louder. The way he locked the door, the sound of the key falling on the counter, the insistent ringing of the phone he always answered with his body turned away. It was like watching an actor trapped in his own script, repeating lines that have already lost their meaning. But the curious thing is that the more he tried to disguise himself, the more effortlessly the truth revealed itself. Lies are like cheap perfume. At first they deceive, then they sicken, and finally leave a trail in their wake. I noticed every contradiction, every slip-up. His gaze would sometimes seek me out, as if searching for some sign of innocence within me, but he found only the mirror of his own doubt. And this reflection, I knew, consumed him inside. I began to move differently, not out of pretense, but out of liberation. I began to take care of myself in a new way. Showers took longer, the white towel absorbing a peace I hadn't felt in a long time. I dressed calmly, choosing clothes that reminded me of the woman I'd been before all this. It was strange to realize how the simple decision not to react was, in itself, an act of power. Silence became my ally, and time my accomplice. Each day became a rehearsal for what was to come. At the dinner table, tension was a third presence. He talked about work, plans, the future, and I just listened, with a half smile that couldn't be read. The game was no longer about anger, but about clarity. I watched as guilt dwarfed him. The man who once made me believe in promises now shrank under the weight of his own performance. The nights were long. The clock seemed to whisper the passing of the hours, and I could hear the wind hitting the windows as if the whole world were waiting with me. Sometimes I'd sit in the living room armchair in the dark house and let my mind wander. I'd think about the many times I'd stifled my intuition, the times I'd preferred peace to confrontation, and I'd realize how love can be a labyrinth where we slowly learn to lose ourselves. Some women build walls. For a long time, I'd built bridges that he'd crossed without looking back. Now I was dismantling each one, stone by stone, until only solid ground remained, where I'd walk alone again. There were times when doubt would try to visit me. That voice that asks if it's worth it, if it wouldn't be easier to pretend not to see. But all I had to do was remember the messages, the secret laughter, the arrogant carelessness of someone who thinks they're untouchable. It wasn't just betrayal. It was disrespect. It was his certainty that I would never dare step outside the role they'd given me. And it was precisely that certainty I was about to shatter. The plan grew naturally, almost organically. It wasn't revenge in the usual sense. It was quiet justice, order returning to its former self. I didn't want screams or public tears. I simply wanted the truth to have a face, a voice, and witnesses. I wanted all those who extolled him as an exemplary husband and upright man to see what lay behind the facade. I wanted him to feel, even for a moment, the weight of the shame I'd carried alone for months. Sometimes when I saw him smile on his phone, I imagined the moment that same smile would freeze. The expression of someone who realizes, too late, that they've underestimated the other side. That they thought the silent woman was weak, when in fact she was just gathering evidence. It was strange to feel so calm. It wasn't hatred, it was an almost sacred serenity, like someone who knows their destiny is already written, and they just have to wait for the page to turn. I treated him with measured delicacy, and it confused him. He seemed unsure if I'd forgiven him or if something bigger was afoot. This uncertainty gnawed at him, and this, more than any words, was the first step toward justice. People around us began to notice cracks. A friend commented that I was different, with a new strength in my gaze. Another said my voice seemed firmer. And I smiled because it wasn't just strength, it was lucidity. The pain had turned to wisdom. And with it came something I hadn't expected. A kind of cold compassion, an understanding that not all punishment requires violence. Sometimes, all it takes is letting the other person drown in their own reflection. The night before what was to come was a particularly silent one. He slept, and I lay awake, observing the outline of the house in the dim light. Every object seemed to bear witness to what was about to happen. The vase we bought together, the painting he chose, the curtains I sewed myself. Everything there told a story that was about to change meaning. When I closed my eyes, I saw the future in flashes. Surprised faces, words spoken aloud, a truth that would echo beyond us. And I realized that what was at stake was not just my marriage, but my own narrative. The chance to finally be the author of my own story. Dawn arrived like a pent-up breath. And as the light filtered through the cracks, I understood that there are moments when silence precedes not the end, but rebirth. And that what comes after the fall is never destruction. It is revelation. And mine was about to begin. The appointed day arrived without warning. No announcement, no omen. Just the ordinary sounds of life. The car engine starting early, the sound of the shower, the smell of coffee. He left with the confidence of someone who believes the world continues to spin on the same axis. And perhaps for him it did. But for me, time was already moving in another direction. Slowly, precisely, like the hand of a clock marking the exact moment before impact. I spent the morning in silence, reviewing details. The messages, the schedules, the captures. Everything organized in impeccable order. Not out of spite, but out of respect for my own suffering. Each file was proof that I had been awake while he slept in lies. That while he believed in disguises, I patiently embroidered the truth. The room was set like a stage. Natural light filtered through the curtains, flowers on the table, the scent of jasmine in the air. Everything seemed ordinary, and precisely because of that, perfect. Home has this power to disguise the abyss. The walls hold secrets, but they also bear witness to silent revolutions. As the clock ticked, I felt my heart beat in perfect rhythm with a plan. Not fast, not slow. Just right. The dinner invitation had been his idea. "We need to reconnect," he said in a soft, rehearsed voice. And I accepted, with a smile he mistook for surrender. Little did he know that forgiveness is sometimes just justice's disguise. I set the table, poured his favorite wine, and my every gesture was a line from the final script. The evening dawned calm, but the air already carried an almost electric vibration, like the moment before a storm. The first guests arrived. Co-workers, old friends, the talkative brother-in-law. Everyone laughed, spoke loudly, toasted to love and fidelity, unaware that truth was walking among them, disguised as calm. He spoke of me with false pride, repeating rehearsed stories, and each word fell through the air like glass about to shatter. I watched, motionless, as if contemplating one's past for the last time. When the time came, silence formed on its own. All it took was a touch of the television remote. The sound stopped. The voices fell silent. The screen lit up, and what had been merely a suspicion became an image. His face, her name, the carelessly typed words. No scream, no explanation, just the stark mirror of what he had become. The next few minutes dragged on like centuries. The guests exchanged awkward glances, their glasses trembling in their hands. He, pale, tried to speak, but the sound seemed to sink into the air. And I, on the other side, remained firm, without tears, without a smile, just presence. There was strength in not reacting. There was dignity in maintaining silence while the truth did what I no longer needed to do: expose itself. When the screen faded, the weight fell on him like heavy rain. The room smelled of shame, and the wine, once sweet, tasted sour. One of his friends tried to change the subject, but it was too late. The image had already done its job. He tried to reach out to touch my hand, but I only took a step back. Enough. The distance between us now was the abyss he'd dug himself. That scene wasn't a triumph, it was a liberation. There was no pleasure in seeing him humiliated, but there was peace in knowing the cycle was closing in front of witnesses. It was confirmation that silence, when used well, is more devastating than any scream. After everyone left, the sound of the door closing was the first sign of a new beginning. The house seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. He, sitting on the couch, mumbled wordless apologies. I, standing, watched him with the look of someone who finally understands. It's not about forgiving the other, but about not betraying yourself. I went to the window. The street was quiet, lit by the moon shining through the treetops. Outside, life went on, distant, indifferent, pure. I felt the cool air touch my face and realized that, for the first time in a long time, I carried nothing. No anger, no fear. Just a clean space inside me, ready to be filled with something new. Behind me, he continued to try to justify the unjustifiable. Broken words, late promises, repeated gestures. Everything rang hollow. What had existed between us was now just memory. And memory, when it loses its connection to love, becomes merely a record. A portrait we keep not out of longing, but out of respect for our own history. Before leaving the room, I took one last look at the bed. The impeccable sheets, the double pillow. It was strange how even the scene of love could seem so cold after the truth. I turned off the light, and in that silent darkness, I felt the echo of a new certainty. The world, finally, began to spin at my own pace again. But with each rotation, it reminded me, to be born again, you must allow something to die, even if that something has your name. The hallway seemed longer that night, as if time wanted to test me one last time. And I kept walking with slow, sure, firm steps. Because there are goodbyes that don't need words, just the courage to not look back. And yet, deep down, something told me the story wasn't over yet. That the true outcome wouldn't be that dinner, nor his downfall. What would come next I didn't yet know. But for the first time I wanted to find out. The next morning dawned with a different silence. It wasn't the same emptiness as before, the one that ached, that weighed. It was a light, almost luminous silence, as if the house breathed a sigh of relief after so long in apnea. The sunlight filtered through the curtains with a delicacy that seemed new, and for the first time in a long time I let it in. I made coffee. The scent spread through the kitchen like a hug. There was something symbolic in that simple gesture. The cup in my hands, the steam slowly rising, the awareness that life went on. Each sip seemed to wash away the bitterness that once lived there. He was no longer home, and even if he were, he no longer held a place in me. I discovered that love ending isn't the end of everything. Sometimes it's just the exact point where dignity decides to be born. As I stared out the window, I thought about how many women like me have woken up in empty beds, believing emptiness was punishment. But now I knew. Emptiness is just the space truth needs to blossom. And this awareness changes everything. It reorganizes the heart, clears the gaze, straightens the posture. It's when body, mind, and soul finally agree that it was never about him. It was always about me. In the days that followed, the city looked different. The streets, once repetitive, now had color. People previously invisible had stories I wanted to hear. I returned to work with more calm, more focus, and without that anxiety of proving my worth. I discovered that I no longer need to shout to be heard. It is enough to exist truthfully, and that, in itself, is an act of revolution. I still encounter curious glances, whispers from those who saw or heard what happened that night. But there is no shame in me. There is power. Because what you exposed me to wasn't scandal. It was courage. And courage, when born from silence, carries a kind of strength that no one can erase. Sometimes I meet people who ask how I did it. And I smile because there's no formula. There's only the moment when you understand that staying the same is the greatest risk of all. That staying the same is often the slowest way to die. Then the choice becomes simple, even when it's painful. And deep down, that choice is what saves us. He tried to reach out to me afterward. Long messages, recycled promises, a regret filled with rehearsed phrases. But the regret of someone caught isn't regret, it's fear. And fear never rebuilds what lies have destroyed. I responded only once. Take care of your conscience. Mine finally sleeps in peace. After that, the silence spoke for me. Today, passing by the mirror, I see a different woman. The wrinkles remain, the gray hairs still haunt me, but there's something different in her gaze. A calm that wasn't there. A certainty that was once only intuition. I've learned that maturity isn't about accepting everything. It's about knowing what to never accept again. And that dignity is a kind of beauty that time doesn't erase. Carry scars, yes. But there's more life in them than in any memory of perfect love. Because each wound taught me to recognize the sound of my own strength. The sound of someone who rises after falling, of someone who speaks after silence, of someone who chooses to exist unapologetically for being whole. And perhaps that's why I share this story. Not for revenge, but for recognition. Because if you've made it this far, perhaps you've also experienced something similar. Perhaps you've also felt the weight of loving someone who diminished you. And if so, may this be the moment something within you awakens. May you understand that every pain carries a seed of new beginning. It just takes courage to germinate. Savor this moment if it touched you, not as someone who simply watches, but as someone who recognizes it. Because stories like mine aren't about the end of love, but about the beginning of respect. And it's at this point that so many people choose to stay, not because of me, but because of the echo that truth leaves in each person. Today, when the doorbell rings, I no longer fear the sound of the unexpected. I've learned that nothing that arrives can be worse than what I've already endured. Life continues knocking on the door, and now when I open it, it's myself I find, whole, awake, free. And if there's one thing I wish for those who listen to me, it's this: that they also allow themselves to open their own door. That they don't wait for the world to repair what they've broken. That they take back what's theirs: silence, time, peace. Because the truly happy ending isn't the one that ends with someone else. It's the one that begins with us.